The Soul Sovereignty podcast is a deep dive into the core wounds and deeply embedded subconscious beliefs that reside within the collective psyche so that you can reclaim your sovereignty and embody your power to experience freedom in your relationships. It is hosted by Jessica Falcon, International Soul Embodiment Guide and Relationship Coach. Visit thepathtosovereignty.com to enter a portal of transformation.
Welcome to another episode of the Soul Sovereignty podcast with myself, Jessica Falcon, and I have a special guest today, Mike Elliott, and we're excited to dive into relationships. Mike is a relationship expert as well, and he particularly focuses on supporting men. He has initiated men program that he offers and talks a lot about polarity dynamics and relationships. And so I'm excited to dive into what is the masculine, what is the feminine, what does it mean to be in polarity, what are these concepts on a practical embodied level, and how they affect us, particularly because we're at such a juncture of redefining relationships in our society. We know a lot of the old programs don't work anymore. We know that we want to release ourselves from those beliefs and patterns and habits of, say, dimming your light, thinking you're too much, silencing your truth, trying to make everybody comfortable. The list goes on. And both Mike and I really specialize in helping you unravel from these programmings to create the kind of relationships you truly desire. And so let's just dive in, Mike. I'm excited to have you here today. And when you're ready, I'd like to start on what is the masculine? Let's just go straight into how we define it. Because if you do a Google search or you look at Instagram, there are going to be a million different definitions of what is it to be masculine? What is the divine masculine? What is the toxic masculine? So as a masculine being, how would you define it?
I love this question so much, and I'm loving this conversation, just the start and where we're going today. Masculine, in my experience, this is my orientation to it. Masculine energy, there's the gender, which I identify as a male. And just so everyone's listening, sometimes I'm talking about masculine as male. Sometimes I'm talking about just masculine essence, which is a little different. Masculine for me is the energy of becoming. It's very doing oriented and becoming. It's like expanding consciousness. Masculine essence wants to consistently grow and expand into more presence, more consciousness, more capacity. That's its general nature. And if we look at the physical orientation of masculine, I like to look at the actual body. There's so much rooted in nature. What do men have? A penis. What does that do? It penetrates. And I feel like masculine energy is a penetrative energy. It's meant to penetrate life with some sort of new experience, new expression. And when we look at what healthy masculine is, because there's a lot of conversation of toxic masculinity and divine masculinity, and it all sounds great, but what is it? The way that I like to look at it is mature masculinity is divine masculinity. It's just a mature man, somebody who's not functioning predominantly from little boy behaviors and has a lot of what I call, and this comes from one of my mentors, Terry Real, wise adult online. They're prefrontal cortex. They have a lot of executive function. They can take in the big picture of, I know who I am. I'm clear in the direction that I'm going. And I am able to hold the perspective and attune to the environment around me and care for that. And I use my power to care for my environment. And I know that I am responsible to bring my power to be in care of my environment. That for me is mature masculinity. One that has such a strong relationship with his own life, his finances, his body, his emotions. And then now he has all this overflowing resource to give other people.
Yeah, I really enjoy that definition. It's not one that you hear spouted often. And what I like about it is that there is this essence of holding space, kind of being a safe space of being responsible for oneself and one's environment to be able to hold others in that safety. And another thing I'm really hearing that's resonating is this capacity to hold space from the prefrontal cortex, which for those of you who aren't too familiar with it, the prefrontal cortex is very akin to the third eye in spiritual circles. And it is developed through meditation, through silence, through stillness. We often are living from our reptilian brain at the base of the head. And when we start to be in silence, meditate, consciously observe our thoughts, we develop the prefrontal cortex quite quickly, scientifically. And the prefrontal cortex gives us the capacity to make mindful decisions based on, say, truth, who we are in the now moment, versus a reptilian response, a reactive response, and maybe even a violent response. And what can happen in my own experience is that when people, men or women, aren't developing that capacity to be in the here, to be in the now, to be mindful about how they are interacting and what they're saying, then relationships end up being quite difficult, to say the least, because everybody's coming into a relationship with their own projections, their own attachments, their own needs, and everybody has a different perception of what they want their own relationship to look like. And so I want us to go into the feminine soon, but I want us to continue this conversation about the masculine in terms of communication, because what I hear is a lot of women over and over and over say, I try to communicate with him and he constantly takes it personally. He constantly thinks something is wrong with me and he can never hear me. So let's talk about that.
Oh, the good old logical mind of a man. It is the most beautiful, powerful thing that we have as men is we default to logic. And it's great in the way that it was originally designed. So if we go into healthy cultures back in time where we were more animal, women would have this hypersensitivity and be tracking the environment 24/7 for safety and to make sure that the kids are safe. And that hyper arousal and scanning for the environment would be the thing to notice. Let's say the tiger coming in that's going for little Johnny that's over on his own. And then her attunement to that would then freak out and be like, tiger. And then the men would be like laser focused, solve the problem immediately. Action, solve, fix, eradicate tiger. And they would bring their power and keep the village safe. Now we've evolved so quickly in the last 100 years where we don't really have those kinds of dangers. We're just in four walls. We're really cushy. We can sit there and scroll Netflix and listen to books. But now women are looking for emotional safety. So there's this place where they're still in this hypersensitivity, scanning for safety all the time. And what they're looking for, because we're in my opinion, a very hyper individualized culture, women don't have all the sisters around them all day where they can process all the feelings that are coming up and met and seen and understood in the way that they just need space held. There's nothing bad or wrong. It's just that's the biological expression of a woman, forever changing, which we can go deeper in a second here. But men, now that we're in the safety of these four walls and there's this big alive woman, her potency and her energy is expressing, men don't know what to do with that because we're in a new experience. And so when a woman is expressing her feelings, this is the most common pattern that I see with the men that I support in my one-to-one containers is, they take it personal. They get triggered. It's so much life energy that it triggers the places in them that they're not feeling all of their life energy and their emotions. And then their standards inside of themselves are so high to do the right thing and to perform and to protect that they lose sight of what is actually needed. So when she starts to express her feelings, immediately triggers the internalized shame. And the internalized shame now makes it personal. Their brain, because of the survival part that can't hold that level of energy, is now saying, oh, Her saying that she's upset and sad is now meaning in my brain, I'm not doing enough. I did it wrong. There's something wrong with me. And now the shame is taking up more space. So now there's actually no space to see her. This is one of the biggest pain points I see with couples. The shame in the man takes up all the space. It's all about him now. And she's sitting there just withering in disappointment because she just needs space held. She just needs to be seen in what it is she's expressing in that moment. And, oh, sweetie, I'm here. God, tell me more, without trying to fix or solve. But if men don't know, if men haven't been initiated or mentored by other men, they don't know the difference of what to actually do. And so they're just defaulting to what their brain wants to do, which is fix and solve the problem that is being perceived as the tiger. Her upset feelings is she's perceiving, she said there's a threat, but there's no tiger, so she's the threat. And so now they're trying to fix her. It's like, no. We've evolved so quickly that the environment, we haven't really oriented to like how do we relate with it differently now? And this is the place where I notice men then end up feeling more shame because they're wanting to do their job. Their biology is trying to get them to do their job, but they just didn't get the message. She's not the thing to fix. And then she ends up feeling, oh, completely missed and disconnected. And then now there's a disconnect between both of them. And now we have two people upset. And that's just because we didn't get the owner's manual of how do we do this new way of relationship.
Well, particularly because the majority of women struggle with using their voice, expressing themselves, speaking their truth. So when they actually gain, one, the capacity to the courage to speak it to, and we're just going to refer to heterosexual partnerships here, but this can apply to all partnerships. When they're speaking to a man and wanting to express that, he goes into shame, unworthiness, taking it personally, all of which is ego, but happens in humans and isn't able to process that. And then it becomes all about him. What happens is then this dynamic of, well, I tried to speak up. He couldn't hear me. So I'm not going to speak up anymore. She's just going to silence herself. He never hears. They withdraw, more resentment, more tension, more withdrawal, more separation, more resentment, more tension. Cycle continues. And one of the reasons this happens is because each individual has to do the work to clear the wounds, clear the projections, develop that consciousness, to align to more of their own inner worthiness and value. And we are asking for more intimacy in relationships than we ever used to. So my expertise is looking at ancient relationships from 5000 BC forward and how they've evolved. And since at least 2000 BC, we have not been in relationships for love. We have not been in relationships for emotional intimacy. We have been in relationships out of survival, out of need, and we've created very deeply embedded codependent dynamics as a result. And so when we're shifting out of, oh, I have to have a man in my life or I have to have a woman in my life, into it's a choice, actually. I don't have to anymore. I'm not required. I have a choice. Who's the partner? Oh, and we have online. Oh, there's more availability. And that shifts into, well, I'm only going to be in a relationship I want. And if women are doing the emotional work to create intimacy, they're desiring intimacy, but men aren't also doing the emotional work to create the capacity for intimacy, there's going to be a continued problem in relationship. And what's fascinating about that is I've actually met an enormous number of very heart-based men who truly desire intimate connection and relationship, who truly desire to meet and be met. But they have a really hard time processing their own emotions because they're not taught emotional intelligence. And it is harder for men, in my experience, to understand a lot of the emotions that women experience because they have a smaller emotional body. So let me just explain this for a second. When I work with people, I work on an energetic, emotional, and mental level, and I can tune into someone's energetic field. What I've seen with male clients is that their emotional body is actually a lot smaller. They don't have the same emotions. They don't run through their systems in the same way. They don't even have the awareness of these emotions. And it's not that they're denying them. They literally just do not have them in the same way that women do. And you could say that sometimes women have, I wouldn't say too big of an emotional body, but they also don't know how to truly process their emotions without thrusting them on other people. That's another problem. So where I'm going with this is the communication piece, because if a man's having a hard time but wants to connect, the woman's wanting to connect but is feeling like he keeps going into his trigger, what can we offer the listener? What would you say to the listener about how to navigate this difference in how we show up and in our capacity?
I love this question. This is the golden question, because this is what creates a reunition, like a reuniting of the differences here. I've noticed there's there's nuances to this, but I'm going to speak to the most general dynamic that I see. And I'm going to push into what you shared a little bit, when the emotional body piece. What I've learned working with men for years and years, sitting in men's circles for over 10 years. And this comes from, one of my mentors, Stan Tatkin, who's, done all the study and the research. Men are very, very, very tender and sensitive. Like the tenderness of their hearts is immense. Their capacity for intuition is immense. And what I would agree with is the range in the relationship to the emotions very different for women. We all have the same amount of hormones, but if we were to see the hormones on like a stock chart graph, the woman's relationship to the emotions is very all over the map. It's forever changing. That is feminine essence. Forever changing chaos, creative energy is the unpredictable, the great mystery. The earth is the representation of the human embodiment. She is forever changing. You can't control her. Now, going back to like what's needed is I just want to name the dynamic. So the thing that I see is needed is a deep presence and compassion on both sides to learn the other side. So there's a golden rule that my partner and I teach in all of our work, and I teach with all my clients, is learning how to move at the pace of connection is what's actually needed. Moving at the pace of connection. What I mean by this is each person has to be able to stay connected to their own experience in their body, able to stay like regulated. I'm here, I'm in myself. I'm not just in my head, and I know what's happening for me. I'm being with everything that's coming up, and I can hold space for what the other person or my partner is sharing. And I'm really in this curious mind, and I want to get to know. If a couple can be in that place, now we're actually creating relationship. Now we're in the practice of intimacy, because if we move at the pace of connection, I believe that is intimacy. And intimacy can be described as so many ways. So I'm going to give you guys the definition that I like to live by. It's creating safety for both people. That's practical, which means we have to actually care about what creates safety for the other person if we want to get to know them, and vice versa. If we're in a place where we think we can see it, if we, this is a big one that that I want to name. Part of what prevents the connection is there are a lot of women doing the emotional work, and the pattern that I've seen is because there's so much emotional work, any parts that haven't been met relationally by a man can move into a little bit of a grandiosity and a propping up and over. And then there's that actual inability to attune what the man needs. And so she's fire hosing him with energy. And now it's actually preventing him to come to the table and actually offer over the work that he's been doing. Because I think there's a lot of men that are doing the work, but it's not being received or it's not being respected. And then if it's not being respected, then he can't offer more. He's just being shut down. And this is one of the best ways I've heard it described. And this is no judgment on anyone. This is just what, we're all learning together. And this is a pattern that I've seen. Women are more connected, in my experience, to their emotions. Like, there's a biological design for that. Like, thank you, women, for what you bring. Women with a womb have a mastery that is far beyond what we have as men. And we need that. And I believe there, through culture, it has been invisible, dismissed, punished, shamed. But there's this advocacy for connection, and it's how do we how the women bring that energy to actually encourage the environment of connection through safety. And this is the way that I've loved it described. There's a lot of women that I'll describe it in this way. Example: my wife went to an event called Earth Daughters, and she was speaking there, and she went to one of these presentations, and a woman asked a whole sea of women. It was a women's only event. She was up on stage and said, "Hey, women, when having sex, what is the number one thing that you would want to say to men?" And they all yelled, "Slow down." Slow down. I'm like, yeah, totally. And then she went into describing, okay, ladies, the reason you need them to slow down is you need time to lubricate, warm up, feel the safety of the connection for you to even be ready to fully let him in. Men are like that in a different way. So women have this polarity where their positive energy that's meant to penetrate is actually coming from their heart. And in a man, that's a negative pull. And there's a lot of places where women are entering in dry, too hard, too fast, their hearts. They're just like coming with their vulnerability. They're coming with their emotions, and they're not going slow to give relational foreplay, to give the man space for what he needs to actually open up his heart to receive what it is that she's sharing. Often she'll just come in hot and dry and just like pound him with it. And he's just clamped off, closed, and he can't let her in because it's too fast, too much, too quick.
That's an interesting, yeah, I see a lot of women do the opposite of not expressing their emotions, but I do recognize that there are different styles that people show up with. But I think what I do see is that when a lot of people are expressing their emotions, often, especially if it's about that man, it's coming from and you should, and I need you to, more of a demand, more of a telling, versus an opening, expressing, allowing truth to unfold. Yeah. And there's a big difference in how we choose to communicate our emotions to another person, particularly in an intimate way. And I think that what I see women enter into with are a lot more expectations that are unspoken about how a man should respond, how he should react, what he should do, what he should say, how he gets it right. If he doesn't do this thing, he's not doing it good enough. If he doesn't do this thing, I'm done. Because a lot of women hold, in some ways, I would say rightfully so, but also from a Southern soul perspective, it's all part of everybody's path to healing and wholeness. A lot of anger toward the masculine. And quite frankly, a lot of men hold anger toward the feminine. And there's a lot of anger prohibiting a lot of true intimate connection because of past woundings, because of the global climate. A lot's being brought up for healing, all being brought up for healing. So we have to be able to hold and acknowledge that rage. But if it comes with you as the man are, or you as the woman are, which happens a lot, fear of being blamed, fear of being attacked, all this stuff, and it can come out in really unconscious ways. If we're doing that, we're not in our hearts. We're not actually, I see you as a soul, as a divine being, as your own person, not as what happened to me 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago, not as the collective masculine, not as the wounding I haven't yet healed. I see a soul. And I'm able to do that because I see my soul. And I'm willing to hold my heart open because nothing will transform and nothing will transmute without love. If we try to heal relationship dynamics without love, We are fooling ourselves because we're only going to keep ourselves in the patterns of the past and locked into resentment, separation, and tension, which no one actually wants. Men don't want that. Women don't want that. We don't want to remain in this conflict and this anger and this disconnection. So with that, one thing you mentioned I really want to highlight and talk a little bit more about is this capacity to, sure, we bring an emotion. I'm feeling a lot of shame from what you just expressed. My core wound of unworthiness is being activated. Maybe the ability to even voice that, but also to maintain connection. Because I'll say for a lot of women, including myself, what actually turns me on in the bedroom is that it didn't just start when the door shut, that there's been connection throughout the day, that it's a constant foreplay. It's a constant connection from heart, from intimacy, being valued, being seen, being heard. And then it can take a minute, whereas maybe it would have taken an hour, 30 minutes, because it's already present. It's already alive. Side note, both people have to cultivate their own aliveness, not depend on the partner for that, but that's a different conversation. So when we're talking about maintaining connection, it's not just through these thoughtful ways of seeing and hearing each other, but also through the conflict, through the trigger, through the, I'm not feeling heard right now. I'd like us to touch on that because a lot of people, men and women, start to feel like, oh, you're not hearing me. Oh, I'm getting triggered. And then they shut down, maybe even dissociate. The person becomes an enemy and they're out of their hearts like that. So let's talk about that because I'll let you start. There's a lot I could say about that, but it's very important in terms of relationships that connection, that's the prime opportunity, right? To shift something.
Yeah. And I love it because you're hitting a biological truth. What I'm hearing is the need on both sides to be heard and seen. Mm-hmm. And if we're heard and seen and understood, we will evolve. We will create more health in our system. And this comes from Dan Siegel's work. And I love this definition of health. Health is determined based off of our capacity to integrate our already lived life. One of the important ingredients for us to integrate our already lived life is relational attunement and new information. We are a relational species and we need mirrors and reflections of ourselves while we're developing, and mirrors of, yes, the challenges, but we need more mirrors of our gifts, our soul's greatest expression. That's what helps us evolve into a belief in ourselves and knowing that we're enough and that it's healthy to have needs and it's healthy to reach when we're feeling scared. And that when we do reach, it will meet kindness, safety, reassurance. And if that doesn't happen, we don't grow up. And so most of society is walking around as little kids in adult bodies, and we don't even know it because people are so numb in their body. They're numb because of the pain of what's happened when they brought their vulnerability. It wasn't heard and seen, and then they had to shut it down, not choosing it. Their nervous system collapsed, froze, the survival part that you described. And it's interesting you're talking about this. We literally just did a master class last night called Heard and Seen. And I created a framework that I teach with all my clients. And so if you're listening, you can even write this down. So the Heard and Seen framework that I created can be remembered as VAR, vulnerability, acknowledgement, and reassurance. A human being needs to be able to recognize their own vulnerability. It works with self first. I need to be able to track, whoa, I got triggered. I'm triggered. We have to be able to have just even the capacity to notice when we're in a vulnerability. Something in me is feeling scared, protective. Okay. And now acknowledgement. This is how it looks in my day-to-day life. If I get triggered with my partner, I put my hand on my heart often and I'm like, whoa. Hey, whoa, little buddy is how I say it. Because if it's hysterical, it's historical, past remembering in the present moment. Okay, little buddy, hey, something just got triggered. We're remembering when connection was scary. So I acknowledge myself. And then I go to reassurance. Hey, and now I'm an adult. And I've got you. I see you. I'm here and I'm never going anywhere. I was adopted twice in the first year of my life. So abandonment wounding, my reassurance is I'm here and I'm never going anywhere. That actually changes the brain. This is the nerdy part. In Dan Siegel's work, there's actually fibers that extend out through the hippocampus, which is the filter of the brain that starts to organize chaotic information that's coming in too quickly. And it puts it in neat little folders and puts an image and a stamp date. And then now you have a memory. But if we don't have a relational attunement, it can't get filtered. It skips that part. And now we're just in total chaos, and our body will just do whatever it can to protect. This is why we need to be able to see the vulnerability, acknowledge it, reassurance. That brings that part of the brain back online so it can do its job. So we all need to be able to do that in ourselves to feel heard and seen inside. This is the inner work. But then if we do that inner work, well, guess what? We now have capacity to offer that to another person. Example, in day-to-day life, if I walk into the kitchen, and this is a common one, I'll walk in and my pace is quick. And for a woman, a man who's in a quick pace, it triggers something is unsafe. And so now it can often create a little bit of a worry. So I'll see it on my partner's face. And what I'm looking at now is back to VAR. I'm looking at her vulnerability and knowing I'm looking at vulnerability, because men can default to taking it personal. I'm doing something wrong. Why can't she be happy? No. I'm looking at vulnerability. So if masculine energy is being protective, the banks of the river, to be an ally, to bring in safety, I just notice vulnerability. And then often I'll see like worry in her face and her eyes start to twitch side to side. I just know this about her. And so I'll walk up to her and I slow my pace down. And men, take note here, 3 times slower than your normal pace. And softening your tone, because she's scanning for safety. If you soften your tone, that her neuroception will take in the care of you noticing and seeing her and adjusting your power. And then I'll come up to her and I'll put my hand on her back, hand on her heart, and then I'll just come up and say, hey, kind of looks like something got triggered there. I'm here. I love you so much. I got you. And just did this a few days ago. And she looked up at me and she's like, you love me? Looking for reassurance. So VAR, vulnerability acknowledgement. So I acknowledge something is happening and she now needs reassurance. Often men can default like, God, doesn't she know I love her? Like, I'm here, aren't I? You know, that's what can happen for a lot of men. And yeah, she needs reassurance. That's what we all need. Yeah, I love you so much. And then, like tears, just, oh, my dad could never give me this. And now she's processing and integrating her past because of a present day moment that took 3 minutes. Game changer. And now I'm going to flip this on its head. So ladies, what I've learned is you got to flip VAR on its head because you're already good at vulnerability. That's not something you need to learn about. So then when relating, what I found is relating with a woman or relating where any situation where there's a lot of activation, you actually need to flip it and start with the reassurance, then acknowledgement, then go into the vulnerability. So what this looks like practically is walking up to a woman, if there's a big, activation, and it's just saying, I'm here. It's reassuring the bond in some way. And sorry for orientation. So women, when you're relating with men, you're already good at the vulnerability. Men need the foreplay. So you actually need to start with the reassurance of the bond and care and safety before you start to share your vulnerability. And I found if a woman can do this, when Courtney does this to me, it's a game changer. So if I'm in a shame spiral, practically she'll walk up, she'll soften, she'll put a hand often on my arm, and she'll like, hey, yeah, I can see there's some shame here, and you're not a bad guy. I know you're trying so hard. So she just reassures immediately. I'm here. I get it. Then she goes, yeah, I know you're trying really hard here. And then she goes into the vulnerability at the end. And I'm not feeling met. There's a place where this is taking up a lot of space, and I really need you to hear me. Whew. Now, because she met me in my nervous system, soft, right? She came in soft, met my need. Something's triggered. Then able to go through that sequence. Now I'm more available. I have more executive function. My wise adult brain's online, and I want to now provide her what she's looking for, but I can actually do it because she met what I'm needing in the softness for my heart to stay open. A man who's in a lot of shame, his heart is closing. He's beating up himself. His standards are increasingly like it's unreachable. Like when someone's in that level of shame, they already, what did you do? You did. And it's like, so it's the reassurance is the thing that pulls them out enough to stay pro relationship. And then we'll move into the ability to actually provide the thing that's wanted, because every man, there's not a man that I have met yet that just doesn't want to provide the thing. They just don't know how. They don't know how to ask for their need. This is like 90% of the men that I've worked with over the years. When I say, what do you need from her? He goes blank. I don't know. Like, and eventually for her to be softer. Like that's usually all that really comes up. So many men don't even know how to communicate what they need because they haven't gotten enough reassurance over time while they're developing to even know, oh, that's helpful for me. I need more of that. I'm going to ask for it. And that is the shift that I notice. If couples can practice the heard and seen framework, we're now creating safety on both sides in a way where both are going to feel it. And then there's the big unlock and aha of, oh my God, this was never about them. This was never about me. This was about we.
One of the things, there are two main things that I keep thinking about as you're talking. And one is that women often forget that men have emotions and that men do actually harbor an immense amount of shame and unworthiness. And I call them, they're one of the 6 core wounds that I think all of humanity has, because women also harbor a lot of shame and unworthiness. But we forget it. Often women can be in this, yeah, but we've suffered, we've experienced this, we've experienced that. And they forget that men have also experienced the denial of their divinity, this lack of true love and acceptance, and the list goes on. And so one is to develop the capacity to see the other person. But in order to do what you're describing, of holding space, I acknowledge you, I love you, I'm here for you, compassion, along with ideally accountability, and then the vulnerability, then the sharing, to have a co-creation within the relationship. What allows each person to do that is, yes, prefrontal cortex, observer consciousness, but the deeper allowance is self-love. Because if we aren't developing the capacity to love oneself, then we will not have the capacity to love another in that way that is freeing, that doesn't say, you have to love me this way or else, but is actually, I'm loving myself enough to have a boundary. I'm loving myself enough to be vulnerable. I'm loving myself enough to sit back, not take this personally, and hear you as your own person so I can receive you while I'm asking you to receive me. I love myself enough that when I notice a trigger inside of me, I don't identify that as my truth. I look at it, I get curious, and I give myself the time to feel it. I love myself enough so that I see an emotion coursing through my system. I don't identify with it, say that's me, that's who I am, thrust it on another, judge it, push it down, get rid of it. I love myself enough to say that is energy moving through me, giving me information that I can take to create more truth and authenticity in my life and to come into deeper levels of my power. I love myself enough, right? So that inner love, I hope you can't hear it, just sort of pouring down rain. I love myself enough to hold that for myself. And as I hold that for myself, I can then hold that space for the other. And so as we start to wrap up, just for time's sake, it's already been 40 minutes. Can you believe it? I'd love for you to give any parting words, as well as where people can find you, your website, if you have anything you want to mention. Because this level of what we're talking about relationship dynamics, everybody is in some relationship at some point in their life. Every familial relationship is dictated by these same capacities developed internally. And there's something unique about an intimate relationship. When people are choosing to come together in partnership, we're not taught these things. We don't know these things. We're not even taught how to feel, much less how to express that feeling to another person without making them responsible for it. And so I would love to encourage listeners, whether it's me, whether it's you, go to these resources, listen to these podcasts, read these articles, do one of the offerings to help you be in your power so that you can experience these types of intimate loving relationships without feeling bogged down and stranded by them at the same time.
Yeah, so beautiful. For everyone listening, one of the things that I think is so important to oversimplify is understanding that definition of intimacy, that it's creating safety for both people. I know there's a lot of women out there that are so frustrated because they look at their partner and they can see he needs to do work. He needs to get help. He needs to be a part of something where he can mature as a man. And the one thing that I want to give women is, with all the development of your work, if you're not already doing this, shower that guy with respect. See him in what he is doing and how he does show up and how hard he's working and the strength that you see in him in the day-to-day present, not what you see in the future and you want him, because his standards and pressure is already so high. So if he's not showing up, it's, wow, I love that you do this and how you make money for our family. You shower a man with respect. You turn back on the part of him that is healthy inside, that healthy healer that will start to seek out support, look for it, and take part, because it's in us. It's in our genes. It's in our DNA. And for the men that are listening, if you're listening to this, good job, like showing up and caring so much that you want to learn these things. And if there's places where you're not, like, so much compassion. This is not something we were often handed down from our fathers, from society. We are all here together to learn how to do what I call the sacred we. There's been so much hurt culturally, in our homes growing up, in school systems, that we're now just starting to learn the basics of how do we treat each other with kindness and care so that it's safe enough to actually just be in the healing process, that it will all just naturally happen if there's safety. So there's something that I've created that's, if there's a woman out here and your partner, you want them to just be curious, I always encourage, share from the place of desire, not from a place of fixing. So, it would feel so good for me if you took Mike's quiz. I'm just so curious and maybe we could talk about it, versus you need to get help and support and do work. Like, no.
Like, it really turns me on when
yeah,
versus
yeah.
I need you to.
Yeah. Like tapping into that juicy feminine and of like, this would make me so wet if you would just do this. And then, like, here's the link. And any man that's listening, I'll share the link with you. You can put it in the show description, but there's a quiz there and you can just see where you are as a man in your development of maturity, and just clarity's power. So if we can get a clear pulse on, oh my God, this is where I'm at. Now we have clarity of the steps that can be taken to create more capacity that's going to set a person free and bring more of that connection. And I think that's what we all want. That's why we listen to these podcasts. It's like, how do I feel more connected? How do we bring in the juice? How do we bring in the pleasure, and less of this crunch and disconnect and blaming each other?
That I know for me would require disconnections in self. And I think that's what it often comes down to, is that it can be easy for a lot of women in particular to connect with others, but not so easy for them to connect with themselves or show up in connection that's honoring who they truly are. And we can actually, I think women need to be reminded that we can actually be loved in our power. We can actually be loved in our truth. We can actually be loved for who we are, because that's the wounding of the feminine. Yeah. And that journey isn't going to come from forcing and trying to fix and raging as a masculine. That's going to come from both men and women showing up, doing the inner work, being on their sovereignty, being vulnerable, learning how to communicate, and hold space for who to see and hear and honor each other. And that, to me, in some ways, was actually a return to the Holy Communion that the ancients experienced over 5,000 years ago. They knew that. They've just been led away from that for a very long time. So in a way, we're coming back to and yet forming a new way of relating. And it's not for the faint of heart. It takes a lot of courage. And that's why, celebrate each of you for being here, for listening. And you got a ton of resources. I'll put all the links below to support you on your path. And Mike, it's been really great to have you on the podcast. I've enjoyed our conversation and maybe another one in the future. And look forward to seeing you all on the Soul Sovereignty podcast next week.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks for everyone listening.